Every so often, an idea comes along that's just so powerful, so revolutionary, it feels like it can actually bend reality. It creates a story that's just too good not to believe. But what happens when that belief completely detaches from the world we actually live in? Well, let's dive into this pattern, this hype cycle of genius, mania, and the spectacular crashes that always seem to follow. It's a story that repeats itself, from the dawn of the internet all the way to the AI boom happening right now.
This quote, this pretty much sums up the entire dot-com bubble. It wasn't about profits, it wasn't about revenue, it was all about the feeling of being part of the future. I mean, you didn't need a business model if your office had a foosball table and your company name ended in .com. You weren't investing in a company, you were investing in a story, a feeling, a vibe.
And this is the question that ultimately brought down one of the biggest companies in America, Enron. They said they were a revolutionary energy arbitrage trans-optimization platform. Right. What does that even mean? Turns out it meant nothing. It was a total house of cards. And it's a perfect example of how complex buzzwords can be used as a smokescreen to hide the simple fact that there's nothing really there. If you can't explain it simply, you might be a genius, or you might just be hiding something.
Now, if you think this is all just ancient history, you'd be wrong. This quote is about the AI boom that's happening as we speak. A co-founder of OpenAI basically admitted they just picked a price for their main subscription to see if people would complain. No deep analysis, no market research, just vibes. That's a $500 billion company running on the exact same fuel as a startup from 1999. The pattern, my friends, is repeating right in front of our eyes.
But here's the really crucial thing to understand. These manias don't start out as scams. Not at all. They start with a genuinely brilliant idea, a true spark of genius that completely captures everyone's imagination. It's a story so powerful, so compelling, it makes everyone believe that this time it really is different.
So what's this number? Well, this number is basically the reason Amazon exists. Back in 1994, Jeff Bezos was a big shot at a Wall Street hedge fund. He saw a report that said the internet was growing at 2,300% a year. He realized this wasn't just a trend, he called it a gravitational force. That single number was the spark. It was so powerful that he quit his job, jumped in a car, and started writing the business plan for what would become Amazon.
And then, of course, you have the darker side of a great story. Take Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. She promised a medical miracle. And that vision, that story, was so incredible, so world-changing, that it attracted former secretaries of state, famous generals, you name it. They didn't really get the science, but they sure understood the power of the story. The pitch was so good, the actual machine became, well, kind of an afterthought. So you have that initial spark of genius. But then, something shifts. The story starts to become way more important than the substance. Belief completely replaces balance sheets. Logic just kind of gets tossed out the window, and the mania machine kicks into high gear, fueled by media hype, easy money, and a massive, desperate fear of missing out.
1,000%. That was Enron's stock gain in just 3 years. And it wasn't driven by profits, because we know now those were completely fake. It was driven by the story of innovation. Fortune magazine called them America's most innovative company 6 years in a row. The more the stock went up, the more people believed the story, and the more people believed the story, the more the stock went up. It was a feedback loop of pure, irrational hype.
And boy, does it build fast. The speed of the dot-com mania was just insane. It went from a niche thing to a national obsession in like 2 years. By 1999, you had companies with no revenue, sometimes not even a product, buying Super Bowl ads. One ad literally just said, "Our website launches in March, please clap." And people did. The momentum just felt completely unstoppable.
This isn't from the dot-com bubble. This saying is from the 1920s, right before the Great Depression. And that just shows you how timeless this all is. It's that exact moment when speculation leaves Wall Street and just infects everybody. When everyone you know suddenly becomes a stock market expert, you know the party is probably about to end.
You know, the signs are always the same. Back then, making a profit was seen as a failure of imagination. Why make money when you could scale? Offices had foosball tables and cereal bars, but not a single business plan in sight. And the most dangerous phrase in finance was on everybody's lips. This time, it's different.
In every single bubble, there's a moment when the first few cracks start to show. The numbers don't quite add up, the stories start to contradict each other, but the party is still going strong, the music is blasting, and nobody wants to be the buzzkill who points out that the kitchen might be on fire.
This is the question that starts the whole thing unraveling. And at first, it's just a whisper, A skeptical journalist, a nervous analyst, maybe an employee on the inside. For Enron, it was a VP named Sharon Watkins. For Theranos, it was one of the founder's own grandsons. This one simple question, it's like a tiny pinprick to a giant balloon. It seems small, but it's more than enough to bring the whole thing crashing down.
So how did Enron perform its financial magic? Okay, imagine you sign a 10-year contract. Now, instead of booking the profit each year as the cash actually comes in, Enron booked all 10 years of potential future profit on day one. It was technically legal, but it was basically financial science fiction. They were literally counting chickens that hadn't hatched, and in many cases, those chickens turned out to not even exist.
And the red flags, they're always there if you just look for them. Business models that are just buzzword soup. Tech that only seems to work when investors are in the room. You see executives quietly selling millions in stock while telling their employees to buy, buy, buy. You get a culture of fear where asking a tough question is seen as betrayal. And of course, the auditors are getting paid millions in consulting fees by the very companies they're supposed to be policing. Classic.
The end of a bubble is never a slow, gentle decline. Nope. It is a sudden, violent shattering of collective belief. It's that moment when everyone looks around at the exact same time and realizes the emperor has no clothes. And that shift from total euphoria to sheer panic can happen in a matter of days, sometimes even hours.
This is the brutal, cold, hard math of the dot-com crash. A nearly 80% drop in just a couple of years. Over $1.7 trillion in value just, poof, vanished. More than half of all the dot-com companies went out of business. Even Amazon lost 95% of its value. People were calling it Amazon.bomb.
This quote, again from the Great Depression, just perfectly captures the human cost of a crash like this. It's not just numbers on a chart. It's retirement savings, college funds, people's homes, their futures, all gone, overnight. For thousands of employees at companies like Enron or Pets.com, this wasn't an abstraction. This was their life.
A collapse almost always follows the same predictable script. It starts small. A few big companies admit their numbers aren't what they promised. That plants a little seed of doubt. The selling starts slow, but then it accelerates as fear takes over and turns into a stampede. Pretty soon, the panic in tech infects everything else. The end result? Worthless stock certificates and a whole lot of foosball tables and dumpsters. So after the fire burns everything down, what's left? The aftermath of a bubble is always this strange mix of total wreckage and surprising opportunity. Yeah, most of the companies are gone forever, but a few survivors emerge, and they're stronger for it. And what's really amazing is that the failures themselves often leave behind the tools for the next great boom.
So what separates the survivors from the failures? In a word, substance. Amazon survived not because of their story, but because of relentless execution and mastering logistics. Google survived because it had a way better product and a real business model. See the difference? Pets.com and Enron sold dreams. Amazon and Google sold things that actually worked. And this might be the most surprising silver lining of a crash. All that so-called dumb money that got poured into doomed companies, it wasn't a total waste. It accidentally paid to build the digital highways of the new internet. Billions of dollars in fiber optic cables, servers, data centers, all bought and paid for by failed startups, became the free foundation for the next wave of innovators like Facebook and YouTube.
There's a famous old quote from the banker J.P. Morgan that really puts all of this in perspective. For 5,000 years, gold has been a real, tangible store of value. It survived the fall of Rome, the Spanish Empire, you name it. But bubbles? They're built on credit. They're built on a collective belief in a future promise. And as we've seen, that belief can be incredibly powerful, but it can also be unbelievably fragile.
And that, of course, brings us right back to today. We see companies valued at hundreds of billions of dollars while losing money hand over fist. We hear the same promises of a new paradigm that will change everything. We're told that old-school things like profit just don't apply anymore. The language is the same, the hype feels exactly the same. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, after seeing this pattern play out again and again, is this time really different? Or is the hype cycle just getting started all over again?